Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So now that Maze of Millennia is out, we're almost out of that strange limbo sort of format. I feel like no one's really committing to any one deck or anything yet, because Phantom Nightmare is going to be such a huge game changer. Obviously, it's bringing us notable cards in Populous and Promethean Princess for the Snake Eye strategy, but it also potentially brings us other solid contenders, including the Voiceless Voice, yugioh, and possibly whatever the new TCG exclusive archetype is going to be. That said, we're taking a look at a few cards that have been creeping up in price over the last little while in preparation for this upcoming format. Let's get started. Alright, we're starting off with a card that I feel like is actually really undervalued at the moment, Snake Eye's Flamber's Dragon. Now, even though this card was only a couple of dollars at release, it has emerged as a key component of a top tier strategy over in the OCG. Populous and Promethean Princess, the two best cards from Phantom Nightmare, make the Snake Eye engine really strong, and they helped elevate Fire Kings to a tier 0.5 level over there. Everyone's expectation is that here in the TCG, Fire Kings will be just as dominant. Obviously, there's differences between the TCG and OCG because of various banlist differences, but for the most part, the Fire King Snake Eye strategy is untouched in both formats. Flamber's Dragon is a really strong card with three very useful effects. If it goes from the hand or field to the graveyard, it summons back 2 level 1 fire monsters from your graveyard. It places a monster on the field or in either player's graveyard to its owner's spell and trap zone as a continuous spell, and then during your opponent's turn, it takes one of those monsters treated as a spell or trap and summons it to the field. This is absolutely a key card that you'll want to run at either 1 or 2 in any strategy using the Snake Eyes Dia Bellstar package. However, it's actually kind of surprising, but Flamber's Dragon's price is starting to trend downwards. Just a month ago, this card was at around $10, but it climbed up steadily until it eventually hit right just under the $20 mark. However, over the last couple of weeks, the card has actually slid back down to around $15, which is sort of a surprise. This card is a secret rare that is absolutely one of the key pieces to a top tier engine coming out very shortly. I believe that what we're seeing is just market fatigue, especially with the lack of events that we've seen over the last month or so. However, I think that Flamber's Dragon at $15 is absolutely still a buy. I expect Fire King Snake Eye to be all over the top cut at YCS Las Vegas, and that's the next big event we have that will definitely set the tone for the rest of the format. I would definitely make sure that you guys pick up at least a couple copies of Flamber's Dragon over the next couple of weeks, because if Fire King Snake Eye is really as dominant as we all think it's going to be, I can see Flamber's Dragon easily hitting the $30 mark by the beginning of March. Next up, we have Superstar Slayer Typhon. This is a card that I've had my eye on for the last little while, as it's something that just feels like it's been undervalued. Typhon is one of the best generic extra deck monsters that's been printed in the last couple of years. Not as great as SP, sure, but honestly I feel like it's right up there in terms of how strong it can be. The card is easily special summoned, it's a floodgate against monsters with 3,000 or more attack points, and it provides non-targeting, non-destruction removal of an opponent's monster. I know that some players aren't too fond of this card, but I feel like unless you just really don't have any room in your extra deck at all, this is a card that basically everyone should be playing. It seems that a lot of players agree with this, as this card's price has done nothing but go up over the last few months. Believe it or not, at one point this card was just under the $20 mark, but it's steadily gone up and now sits just between $30 and $35 per copy. I think that for a while there, it was stuck at around 28, but just over this past weekend, I think it broke past there, and it's just a sign that players are realizing it's something that they should definitely own a copy or two of. This card is obviously brand new, coming out in Age of Overlord, so it isn't expected to be reprinted until the tins coming later on this year, and I mean, I suppose there is a chance that it could be in Rarity Collection 2, or at least some people are speculating that it'll be in there, but I'm not going to believe it until I see it because it's really all just speculation at this point. That said, I don't really see a reason coming for this card to go down in price. I guess maybe if it sees like absolutely no play at YCS Las Vegas, then yeah, players will start to dump it, but I just find that really unlikely. I think that ultimately this card is going to remain pretty steady in terms of price, maybe fluctuate a little bit and stay between $30 and $40. I think that if you don't own this card, you should aim to pick it up at around $30, since it's a card that you will likely use in a lot of your extra decks between now and the time it eventually gets reprinted. Okay, so we're moving on to a couple of smaller things that might have been easy to overlook, and the first one is the Gold Pride card Better Luck Next Time. This is a continuous spell for the Gold Pride archetype that has two really useful effects. First, it searches for a Gold Pride monster when it's activated, and then makes you lose life points equal to that monster's attack points, hopefully putting you under your opponent. And then if you go and bounce one of your extra deck monsters to summon back the main deck equivalent from your graveyard, you get to draw a card as well. So generally, this card is at least breaking you even, but from there it has the potential to generate you advantage every single turn. Now, while Gold Pride was hyped up and supposed to be a really strong competitive archetype, it never really managed to see much success. Players tried using it alongside the Punk cards, but it just never took off. Now, however, we have a couple of new Gold Pride cards revealed to be coming in Legacy of Destruction. To be honest, they're not that amazing, but they're not completely horrible either, and I think that they give players hope that maybe there will be some additional Gold Pride support coming in the near future. With better luck next time, we want to be a little bit careful if you are looking to pick the card up. Looking at the 1 month graph, right, it appears that the card is only moving upwards. The card was at around $6 a month ago, but with the new reveals, it's managed to just hit the $10 mark. However, when we look at the 6 month graph, which you guys will see at the bottom, we actually see that the card has only ever hit a high of just over the $10 mark. I think that with buying into the card now, it's just a little bit too late. Sure, there is the possibility of more Gold Pride support coming, but the card has already been inflated. I think that in order for it to really exceed that $10 point, we would need to see enough to think that Gold Pride is going to be a meta strategy within the next couple of formats, which ultimately seems unlikely, especially with the possibility of Fire King Snake Eye being a tier 0 strategy. If you can grab the card for like $5 or $6, then sure, it might be worth a gamble to hold on to, but anything higher than that, you're just buying into a card that is at its hype price, and you're probably going to end up taking a hit on it in the long run. The one thing we don't know about is whether or not the card will get a reprint in the 2024 tins, since a lot of the time TCG exclusive archetypes can be excluded from the tins, but that doesn't change the fact that the card is just no longer a good pickup. Up next, we have a card that just saw a really big bump this past weekend. It's Memento Bone Party. So all in all, the Memento archetype is just not that great. I don't think the deck has done anything at all in the OCG, and I don't think I've even seen like the deck topping or regionals here in the TCG either. I think they're really cool. They are retrains of old vanilla monsters, which is really fun, but I do think they're just a bit too slow to function in today's game. However, they did actually get a couple of really good cards revealed in Legacy of Destruction, a new fusion monster and a new quick play spell card. They both actually read really well. The monster lets you destroy a memento from hand or field and then search for 2 from your deck, while the quick play spell can let you fusion summon by shuffling graveyard material back into the deck. It shouldn't be a surprise then that Bone Party has almost completely disappeared from the market. This is a quick play spell card that lets you destroy a memento monster from your hand or field, and then take a memento from your deck and either special summon it or add it to your hand, making this one of the best memento cards currently available. Looking at TCG Player, we see the card had a small bit of an upward trend over the last week or two, as it went from $6 to $8 with the new support, but as of Sunday when I'm recording this, the card is up to $15 on TCG Player, with very few listings available. I don't know how out of nowhere this is. Maybe there's someone that found some crazy memento spice and is going to break the format with it, but I haven't seen it yet, and I don't really think the deck's going to be that overpowered. I do think that people are just thinking maybe it'll be good in the future eventually, as we did get support for it in both Phantom Nightmare and Legacy of Destruction, so hopefully there's more memento support on the way. Don't expect the current $15 price point, however, to stick. Rather, expect players to gradually list their copies of Bone Party back onto the market, and for the card to cool off back to around the $10 to $12 range. Moving on, we have a pretty obscure card here. It's Dried Winds. So I vaguely remember talking about this card a few years ago. This card is support for the Arrow Mage archetype. It's able to pop your opponent's monsters multiple times in the same turn. Of course, it is dependent on some life gain and life point differences, but of course that's the whole gimmick of the Arrow Mage deck. While Arrow Mages have never really been all that competitive, I guess they are something of like a waifu deck, as most of the monsters are all girls, but aside from that, the deck doesn't have any sort of competitive appeal, and honestly the strategy is pretty bad. However, Arrow Mages are getting some new support in Phantom Nightmare. I believe they're dark versions of a bunch of Arrow Mage cards, so naturally people looking ahead to the next set and trying to figure out what they want to play might turn to Arrow Mages and decide that they need to pick up copies of Dried Winds. Weirdly enough, Dried Winds only has one printing from way back in Clash of Rebellion as a super rare. This card was never a special edition promo or a tin reprint or anything like that, so a single copy of this card right now is going to cost you $18, and we can see that the price has done nothing but climb steadily over the last several months. Without a reprint, I would assume that the card's price is going to stay relatively steady, although I could see it going slightly up or down, depending on how many people actually want to play with it. Ultimately though, this card just feels like a ticking time bomb. It's one of those cards where yeah, it's expensive right now, but not because it's good or meta relevant, but just because it has such limited availability and is going to be really difficult to find. Once it does get reprinted, the card is basically going to be bulk, so don't expect it to hold any value. It wouldn't surprise me to see this card as a common in OTS 24, since that should be when around Phantom Nightmare drops, which should bring the price way down. So I would be keeping this card in your binder and looking to trade it actively, or maybe sell it at a discount just to get rid of it as soon as possible. Alright, this is an interesting card that might be a decent pickup moving forward. It's the Unchained Soul of Rage. So obviously the Unchained deck is a lot weaker with Sharvara limited to 1. I don't really think that the pure deck is viable anymore, though there are some players trying to make it work. However, while a lot of the Unchained cards aren't exactly useful, I think that the Soul of Rage could actually be a useful tech option in the future, and it's something I'd consider picking up. If you guys look at the chart here, yes, Soul of Rage has had a massive fall off. I remember when the card, even the Ultra, was easy to move at around $12 to $13, but obviously the deck is no longer one of the best decks in the format, and the price has fallen quite a bit. In fact, the card is at its lowest price point within the last 6 months, ever since Unchained first popped up on the competitive scene with the release of Duelist Nexus. Right now, you can get a secret rare copy of the Soul of Rage for around $7, while the Ultras are between $5 and $6. This is actually a card that I would consider picking up a single copy of because it could possibly be useful in a couple of other decks. We've seen it in the past where Labyrinth would play one Sharvara and one Escape and use Yama and the other Unchained Link monsters in the extra deck for some Link plays and disruption. This could still be a thing, as Labyrinth is going to be a good deck moving forward, but it could also be a neat little package to use in the Yubel strategy. A lot of the cards in Yubel decks are Fiends, and using Sharvara to make a copy of Soul of Rage and having the additional interruption on your opponent's turn might actually be pretty useful. If you are going to pick one up, I'd definitely look at getting a secret rare copy. At a price difference of only $1 or $2, you're certainly better off going with the max rarity printing of the card, since it is more likely to retain value if it does get reprinted. However, that reprint is still going to hurt the prices of both versions overall, so while I would recommend grabbing the one copy now in secret rare, I wouldn't invest in very many more copies than that. There is one final card I want to take a look at, and that is Made to Order Mermaid Outfitter. So I remember when I read this card when it first came out as a TCG exclusive, I thought it was just going to be absolutely insane. And I mean, to be fair, if the card came out like 7 or 8 years ago, I think it would be. This card banishes a card in your opponent's graveyard, and then lets you add a copy of the same card from your own deck to your hand. So while this card could be useful for searching generic cards like a Pot of Prosperity or an Ash Blossom, the card would theoretically really shine in the mirror match, where you can get rid of a key combo piece or something like that from your opponent's graveyard and get a copy of that same card for yourself. The situation that comes to mind right now is with Fire King Snake Eye, since you could banish a Garunix and then search your own so your opponent can't recur it, or you could hit like a Populous or something, and that would also allow you to special summon the Populous out of your hand as well. Now, this card is basically the definition of a penny stock. Even right now, I think the card is still between 50 cents and $1 on TCG Player. However, this card used to basically just be a bulk super rare down at like 10 or 15 cents, and now it's something that players are actually actively looking for and going out of their way to pick up. The card is moving like crazy as well, with tons of copies being sold every single day on TCG Player. I believe that the card has been hyped up by a couple of other YouTubers. I know Yassine at least did a video talking about the benefits of this card and how it was really strong. And yes, at 50 cents or even $1 each, I do think that it's a card that everyone should own at least 3 copies of just in case. However, unless you're buying it for like a quarter or something, or you expect to be able to trade it for a couple of dollars worth of stuff at your locals, I wouldn't expect this card to go up in price too much more. As a super rare from a relatively recent set in Photon Hypernova, there should still be a ton of copies on the market, as we can tell by having so many copies moving every day, but the price not really moving up, relatively speaking, too much at all. At the same time, I'm not sure if it's really worth playing this card over a card that potentially has a higher impact on your opponent, something like Soul Release, which is able to banish multiple cards from your opponent's graveyard and be even more disruptive. Be careful with this card, definitely dig it up out of your holo bulk if it's in there, and keep a few copies in your trade binders because people will definitely be asking for it, but just don't expect this card to suddenly become a $5 card anytime soon. Alright guys, that is all we have for today. Some pretty interesting cards to actually see moving. Just remember that we always want to look at a card's current price point relative to its price in the past, right? Just because we see a card starting to trend up that doesn't mean that you absolutely have to go and grab it now, because that's a surefire way to get burned a lot of the time. Anyways, guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button for me. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.